In the remote hills of Northumberland, England, hidden behind layers of bramble and forgotten forestry, lies a place known to only a few daring explorers, Hollow Reach. On old maps, it's marked only as Limestone Fissure Number 42. Nothing special, just another cave system carved by millennia of water. But the locals in the nearby village of Netherby had a different name for it: the Mouth That Breathes. Most believed it was a myth, a cautionary tale passed down over pints at the pub, stories of sudden floods, vanishing hikers, and the low breathing that echoed from within the earth. But to Eli Maddox, a veteran cave diver and thrill seeker, it sounded like the ultimate challenge. On September 14, 2008, Eli and his closest diving partner, Tristan Vale, drove 6 hours north with their gear packed tight. Multiple oxygen tanks, full face masks, dry suits, underwater lights, guideline reels, and backup tools for emergencies. Both had years of experience in tight underwater systems. Both had cheated death more than once. But nothing they'd done before prepared them for what lay beneath Hollow Reach. The entrance was barely visible, a moss-covered crack in the hillside, no wider than a man's shoulders. Crawling inside meant dragging themselves through the mud, feeling the temperature drop with every foot forward. The air grew dense, damp, and still. The first 100 meters were dry. Tight passages opened into larger chambers filled with stalactites and dripping mineral formations. The sound of their boots and breathing echoed strangely, almost too much, like something was mimicking them. Eventually, they reached the first sump, a water-filled tunnel barely wide enough to swim through. Eli, as always, went first, releasing his reel line and guiding them into the submerged void. Visibility was decent. The water was frigid, but calm. After 70 feet, they emerged in an air chamber just big enough to sit up. They marked it Chamber 1 and rested. A few stale protein bars later, they agreed to continue. What followed was a 230-foot dive into a more complex passage. This time, the cave floor dropped sharply, and visibility deteriorated. Still, their training kicked in. They remained calm, methodical, and connected to their guideline. On the other side, they surfaced in a chamber so large their lights couldn't touch the ceiling. That's when Tristan first mentioned it. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. Eli listened. There it was, a slow, rhythmic hum, a pulsing sound, like air moving through a lung. The rock seemed to breathe. "Ignore it," Eli muttered. "Probably just shifting water pressure." But Tristan wasn't convinced. Even so, they continued. "One more sump," Eli insisted. They had enough air, backup tanks, and emergency reserves. The third sump was deeper, tighter, and colder. Only 20 feet in, their lights began to flicker. Sediment clouded the water, a silt out. Tristan gripped the line and tapped twice. Pause. But Eli pressed forward. That's when it happened. A tug, not a rock, not a snag. It felt like fingers around his ankle. He turned his light. Nothing. But when he looked back, Tristan was gone. He spun, flashing his torch in every direction. Nothing but floating debris. No bubbles, no silhouette. Just black. Panic tried to rise, but Eli shoved it down. He followed the guideline backward, breathing slow, disciplined. Then he saw it, a glint of metal beneath an overhang. Tristan's tank. He was wedged sideways under a rocky ledge, unconscious. His regulator had slipped out. Air bubbles leaked uselessly from the mouthpiece. Eli jammed it back in and shook him. Nothing. He pounded his chest. Finally, a twitch, then a gasp. Tristan was alive, but they were deep and running low on air. The return was brutal. Tristan was barely conscious, and Eli had to drag him by his tank harness while checking their guideline constantly. Their backup light gave out 30 feet from the second chamber. They swam in pitch black. By the time they reached the surface again, 6 hours had passed since they entered. They collapsed in chamber 1, gasping, shivering uncontrollably. Tristan vomited water. His lips were blue. But the cave wasn't finished. From deep below, a rumble began, distant at first, then louder, like stone shifting or something alive stirring. Water surged up through the sump behind them. They scrambled toward the exit. The tight passages they had slithered through earlier now seemed impossibly small. Rocks were slick, their limbs numb. But adrenaline took over. They clawed forward, inch by inch, ignoring the pain. When they finally burst into daylight, it was nearly midnight. A cold drizzle fell over the forest. They had been gone for over 14 hours. Tristan was hospitalized for hypoxia and severe hypothermia. He survived barely, but he never entered another cave again. Eli, too, left cave diving behind. Hollow Reach was their last descent. To this day, the cave remains sealed with concrete. A rusted sign near the overgrown path reads, "Danger. System collapsed. Entry illegal." But if you stand near the old entrance and place your hand on the earth, some say you can still feel a faint vibration, a slow, steady breath. Hidden deep within the rainforest of Yucatan, Mexico, lies Cenote Shibalba, a pristine sinkhole surrounded by jagged limestone and dense, humming jungle. Though it appears untouched by man, beneath its turquoise surface lies a submerged cave system that stretches for miles into darkness. It was once sacred to the ancient Maya, believed to be a gateway to the underworld. For Noah Drayton, a 34-year-old cave diver and urban explorer from Arizona, it was an irresistible mystery. He'd spent years diving the Mexican cenotes, mapping their passages and posting jaw-dropping footage online. But Cenote Shibalba was different. No official maps, no known depth. Local dive shops refused to guide there. When Noah asked why, the answer was always the same. The cave doesn't want to be found. Undeterred, Noah assembled a private team. His girlfriend and dive partner Rhea, and their friend and safety diver Luis, a local who knew the jungle paths. On August 2nd, 2021, they hiked 3 hours into the jungle and reached the cenote just after noon. Sunlight filtered through the trees, making the pool glow an eerie blue. "It's beautiful," Rhea whispered. "Let's make history," Noah grinned. They donned their suits, triple-checked their tanks and electronics, and descended into the cold, glass-clear water. The first 30 meters were magical. Open blue, limestone walls, shafts of light dancing through bubbles. Then the cave mouth, a narrow, jagged slit at the bottom of the cenote, just big enough to slide through with gear. Inside, the cave widened into a sprawling chamber. Stalactites the size of trees hung from the ceiling. The floor was littered with ancient bones, jaguar skulls, deer antlers, even human remains. Evidence of ritual offerings, untouched for centuries. Rhea stopped to record. Noah marked their guideline and led the way deeper. Luis remained behind, per protocol, to monitor time and provide emergency air if needed. Rhea and Noah passed through a series of narrow tunnels and chambers. Their rebreathers hissed softly in the silence. The cave walls shimmered with calcite crystals, earning the system its nickname, the Crystal Veins. Then, something strange. Their lights began to flicker, not fail, just pulse. The water grew murkier. The walls seemed to bend like a mirage. Rhea squeezed Noah's arm and pointed to her dive computer. Depth, 51 meters. air remaining, 42 minutes. It should have been enough. They pushed on, Noah convinced they were close to a hidden air dome he'd seen marked on a centuries-old Spanish map. Then they found it. A narrow shaft rose at an angle, leading up to a black void. Noah kicked upward, Rhea close behind. They broke the surface inside a massive air pocket, sealed off from the world. The ceiling was covered in hanging roots. The air stank of sulfur and rot. Rhea removed her mask and coughed. "This isn't on any map," she whispered. "No one's ever been here," Noah said, eyes wide. They rested for 10 minutes, hydrating and checking gear. But then they heard it, a whisper, faint, breathy, echoing off the stone. Neither spoke. Rhea's hand trembled slightly. Then came the scraping, like stone sliding over stone. "I don't like this," Rhea said. "Let's go." They submerged again and descended back into the tunnel. But something was wrong. The guideline was gone. They had tied it off. Both remembered it clearly. But now it floated free, unanchored, trailing in loops like spaghetti. Visibility was down to less than a meter. Noah reeled it in, hoping to backtrack, but the route no longer looked familiar. Tunnel branches they hadn't seen before now yawned in all directions. They were lost. Panic flickered in Rhea's eyes. "Turn around," Noah signed. She nodded. They moved carefully, conserving air, scanning for landmarks. The shimmering calcite was gone, replaced with jagged rock and silt-covered walls. Then Rhea suddenly stopped and pointed her light up. A shadow moved, a human-sized figure just above them, still, suspended, and then gone in a blink. Noah spun his torch. Empty. It couldn't have been Luis. He had no reason to follow, and no diver moved like that. Rhea began to breathe faster. Noah tried to signal calm, but then a hand, blackened and bony, shot out of the silt wall and grabbed his fin. He kicked wildly, breaking free. Silt exploded in all directions. In the chaos, they were separated. Noah called her name through the comms. Nothing. He hovered, pulse pounding. Then a shape appeared in the silt, a diver's light. He swam to it, but it wasn't Rhea. The figure had no mask, no tank, just hollow sockets where eyes should be. He turned and fled. Blindly, he surged through tunnel after tunnel, scraping gear on rock, ignoring pain. His computer beeped. 10 minutes of air. Then, a light ahead. Luis. He had come looking when they didn't return. Noah surfaced back in the main cenote, coughing, sobbing, alive. Rhea was never found. They searched for days. Even elite rescue divers were brought in. But the cave had changed. New collapses, altered routes, like it wanted her to stay. To this day, Noah never dove again. He still wakes in cold sweat, hearing whispers, feeling the pressure of unseen hands. And the locals? They were right. Some caves don't want to be found. Charente, Western France, August 17th, 2019. For most tourists, the French countryside offers vineyards, chateaux, and quiet cobblestone villages. But for Iris Lang, a 29-year-old German speleologist, it was a map in a dusty local archive that offered something more tantalizing. An 18th century sketch of a souterrain sanctuaire, an underground sanctuary beneath the limestone cliffs of Charente. The paper was torn, the coordinates rough, but it was enough. She contacted her longtime diving partner, Maxime Duret, a cautious but skilled French cave diver who'd spent years charting unexplored caves. The plan was simple: explore, record, and document, nothing reckless. They arrived at the supposed location, a small sinkhole overgrown with moss and brambles, half hidden near an abandoned stone chapel. It looked like a forgotten well. Locals never spoke of it. Those who did only called it La Gorge du Silence, the throat of silence. Despite the unsettling name, the pair prepared their equipment. Iris attached her guideline. Maxime performed final checks. 12:32. They descended into pitch blackness. The water was colder than expected, visibility limited to less than 2 meters. Their lights illuminated ancient stone steps carved directly into the rock, leading downward. Proof that this place had been accessed before, long ago. About 40 meters in, they reached the first chamber. It was unlike anything they'd seen. A vast domed cavern, hundreds of feet wide, with carved columns stretching from floor to ceiling like a drowned cathedral. The architecture was Romanesque, impossibly preserved underwater. Mosaics lined the walls, religious iconography blended with symbols Iris couldn't place. Eyes without pupils, spirals within spirals, serpents with human faces. Iris was mesmerized. Maxime was tense. He tapped her arm. 15 minutes in. Turn soon. But Iris motioned toward a tunnel just past the chamber. Reluctantly, Maxime followed. The tunnel narrowed, descending at a sharp angle. The rock grew darker. Veins of obsidian laced through the limestone. It felt wrong. Then came the whisper. Not mechanical, not hallucination. Both of them heard it. A wet, gravelly voice slithering through the water. Come. Their comms went silent. Maxime turned, signaling to retreat, but Iris pushed forward. Her light caught something ahead. A statue. Massive, humanoid, kneeling, arms raised to the ceiling. Its face was cracked, but beneath the algae she could make out a smile, stretched too wide, too human to be carved centuries ago. She swam closer. Suddenly, her light died. Not dimmed, dead, total black. She turned to signal Maxime, but he was gone. No light behind her, no bubbles, no sound, only darkness. And then, movement. Something was swimming with her. Her heart pounded. She felt the current shift, as if pushed. Then her backup light flickered on for a second, just long enough to see a face directly in front of hers, inches away. Not Maxime, not human. It had no eyes, only holes, and its mouth hung open, filled with teeth like shattered glass. She screamed, the sound lost in the regulator. Then she bolted. Blindly, frantically, she swam back through the tunnel. Her hand scraped the wall. Her fingers found the guideline. She pulled herself forward, ignoring the burn in her lungs. She found Maxime back in the cathedral chamber, his light spinning in the water. He was floating, limp, mask off, blood leaking from his nose, still breathing. She grabbed him, activated her beacon, and followed the line out. The ascent took forever. 1:44 p.m. They surfaced. Maxime was unconscious, but alive. Iris dragged him out, sobbing. Aftermath. Maxime woke in the hospital 3 days later. He remembered nothing after entering the cathedral. Doctors said he'd suffered a barotrauma, but his injuries didn't align with any known diving incident. Tiny punctures across his arms. Bruising around his jaw like hands had gripped him. Iris reviewed her dive footage. All of it was corrupted, distorted frames, audio warping into static. The only intact image was a single still from the chamber, the statue's face. In the background, behind its shoulder, was a second face, watching. No one has entered La Gorge du Silence since. The sinkhole has since collapsed, filled by a rock slide during a storm 2 weeks later, or so authorities claim. But Iris believes the cave did not collapse. She believes it closed itself. And sometimes, when she closes her eyes, she hears the whisper again. Come. In the remote wilderness of northern Mexico, deep within the Sierra Madre Mountains, lies a cavern system known only to a handful of local explorers. La Sombra, the Shadow. Marked vaguely on no modern maps, it is a labyrinth of underwater tunnels and air pockets carved over millennia by an ancient river long since vanished. The locals whisper legends of the cave, that it breathes, that those who enter hear a slow, dragging inhale and exhale from its depths, and many who dared explore never returned. For Daniel Reed, a seasoned cave diver from California, this was exactly the kind of challenge he craved. On October 12, 2017, Daniel and his partner Sophia Morales arrived at the trailhead after a grueling 3-day trek through dense jungle and rocky ridges. They carried full cave diving rigs, twin tanks, redundant air supplies, dry suits, reels for guideline, multiple waterproof lights, and emergency equipment. Both had extensive experience in underwater caves around the world, cenotes in Mexico, flooded caves in Florida, and the crystal-clear karst tunnels of Slovenia. But nothing prepared them for La Sombra. The entrance was a narrow fissure at the base of a steep cliff, barely visible beneath tangled vines and moss. The temperature dropped sharply as they squeezed inside, the damp, stale air thick with the scent of minerals and earth. Their headlamps barely pierced the inky darkness. For the first 200 feet, the tunnel remained dry, tight corridors opening into domed chambers where jagged stalactites hung like teeth. But soon the passage sloped downward sharply, and the first sump, a water-filled passage, loomed ahead. Daniel clipped his reel to a metal bolt fixed in the rock and plunged beneath the surface. The water was freezing, murky, with visibility down to mere feet. After 50 feet, the tunnel opened into an air pocket chamber, barely big enough to sit upright. Sophia followed, and they paused to check their gear and rest. That's when they first heard it. A faint, rhythmic sound, a slow inhalation, like the cave itself was breathing. "Do you hear that?" Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. Daniel nodded, heart pounding. "It's just water movement, pressure changes." But as they continued, the sound grew louder. The water seemed to pulse, as if alive. Their flashlights flickered unpredictably, casting erratic shadows on the walls. The next sump was longer and narrower, forcing them to wedge their bodies through tight, jagged rock. Midway through, a sudden current pushed against them, pulling them deeper. Daniel's reel line snagged briefly, then went slack. Sophia froze. "Line's gone," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "Stay calm," Daniel urged, but his own voice betrayed his fear. In the black water, the breathing grew louder, closer. It was no longer just a sound. It felt like a presence, something massive and ancient stirring in the depths. Suddenly, something grabbed Daniel's ankle. Cold, strong fingers that pulled him back. He kicked hard, breaking free, but his light caught a glimpse of something monstrous, a dark, shifting shape barely visible in the murk. Sophia screamed and tried to reach him, but the current pushed her backward. Daniel clawed at the rock walls, desperate to find solid footing, but the cave seemed endless, a trap of stone and water. Their air was running low. Daniel managed to secure a small ledge in a narrow passage, signaling to Sophia to join him. As she arrived, gasping for breath, the sound of breathing enveloped them, echoing off the rock like a living heartbeat. "Something's here with us," Sophia said, her eyes wide with terror. "Then we need to get out, now." They began the slow, agonizing swim back, but the water had changed, thickened, almost viscous. Every movement was a struggle. Their lights dimmed to near darkness. At one point, Daniel turned to check Sophia, only to see her face twist in horror. Something invisible brushed past her neck, leaving an icy trail. The final sump was a brutal gauntlet, narrow with sharp rocks and the water dropping into freezing depths. Visibility was zero. They had to follow the guideline by touch alone. Daniel's hand brushed the line, then felt a sudden jerk. The line snapped. Panic surged. "Line's broken!" he shouted. Sophia was gone. He spun blindly, thrashing, but only felt cold water and the crushing silence. Then the breathing, louder than ever, right behind him. He forced himself to stay calm, pumping his regulator, moving hand over hand along the rocky wall, searching for any sign of Sophia or the exit. Suddenly, his hand closed on a cold metal buckle, Sophia's tank. He pulled her body out of the water, barely conscious. With trembling hands, he pushed the regulator back into her mouth. She coughed violently, eyes fluttering open. "Stay with me," he whispered. They had less than a third of their air remaining. The journey out was hellish. Daniel dragging Sophia, dodging collapsing rock and swirling sediment that threatened to blind and suffocate them both. By the time they surfaced, the sky had turned dark. The jungle around was eerily silent. They collapsed on the muddy bank, shivering and gasping. Sophia survived, but was haunted by nightmares for months. Daniel never returned to La Sombra. Years later, the local authorities sealed the cave entrance with reinforced concrete, warning hikers and explorers. Warning: dangerous conditions, unauthorized entry prohibited. But on quiet nights, when the wind is still and the jungle breathes softly, some say you can hear the slow, steady inhale and exhale coming from beneath the earth. The breathing of the abyss, waiting for its next victim.